That's right. We're kicking off RLPSA annual conference to go first by spending 2 minutes with a phenomenal sponsor, Interface. All right, we've got Sean Foley, Senior VP of National Accounts, to join us today. What's going on, Sean?
Great to be here, Amber. Great to be here. Thanks.
All right, we really appreciate you guys sponsoring this kickoff session, which is going to be phenomenal. Okay, so let's get right into it. So Interface, you guys have been a unique partner in the restaurant community for a long time. So tell us how you partner with those loss prevention teams.
Yeah, well, really, Amber, for over 25 years, Interface has provided the latest in security technology to some of the largest, most recognizable restaurant brands in the United States. We're a trusted partner to the industry for everything from interactive remote monitoring to video analytics solutions to managed network. And the crown jewel of our operation really is our interactive remote monitoring operation, where we're protecting thousands of businesses with live video and two-way audio.
Yeah, so cool. So being that close to the restaurant community, like what are the loss prevention professionals saying out there?
I tell you what, on a daily basis, I've got leadership in the asset protection community coming to me and asking about, hey Sean, I've got vagrants and troublemakers bothering customers in my dining room or my drive-through. Or I've got a major shrink problem at the point of sale with inventory going out the back door. Or I've got a business in a difficult neighborhood and my business was recently robbed or burglarized. And that's really where Interface jumps in.
Yeah, so I hear congratulations are in order because you have received $60 million of equity funds flowing into Interface, and everyone knows that just means innovation, right? For your customers and this community. So I think everybody's looking for a little innovation these days, battling a global pandemic and social unrest. So tell us, what innovative solutions have you guys pivoted to for tackling the pandemic, and how do those funds help you?
I tell you what, innovator die, right?
Yeah, right.
So one of our biggest innovations of late was our personal protection monitoring service, and that is essentially taking our virtual guard monitoring and taking it totally mobile with the wearing of just a small device on a restaurant worker, on a frontline worker. With a push of a button, we've got our Interface monitoring operation right on the scene with live audio and two-way video. And for businesses that are trying to open and close with less people, for restaurateurs that are more and more on the go, it's a great way to protect your people.
Yeah, absolutely. That is top of mind to everyone I know listening in on our virtual conference to go. Thank you so much, Interface. And we appreciate you, Sean, for being here, sharing your 2 minutes with us.
Thanks so much, Amber.
Let's go! Okay, RLPSA annual conference to go. I am welcoming back our esteemed guests, James Fripp and Steve Antoine from Yum Brands. They already know who you are, guys. Welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Glad to be here.
It's nice to be back.
All right. As you guys know, and as our audience knows, we mix it up. We are progressing the conversation from our first discussion from Apex and Talk LP podcast, getting comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. It's kind of like our theme. We're pushing everybody. So we're going to kick it right off because this is a meaty session. I want to get to everything we have planned. Getting you on the hot seat, of course, James, starting with you. Talking about Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, your official title at Yum. What exactly does that mean at Yum? And there's been a lot of talk about measuring success, and that data does in fact go into this conversation. And a lot of people wondering, how do you measure the success? So I wanted to talk a little bit about what your role means at Yum and how you measure it. And then we'll jump over to Steven to get his perspective from the LP security side.
Sounds good. Thanks again for the invite. Really appreciate that. In terms of the role itself, the role is at the end of this individual who inspires our work, who inspires the organization to be what we need it to be. And what I mean by that is the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer is not a nice to do. It's the work that's needed to help our business continue to be successful. And what I mean by that is we don't serve some customers. In fact, we don't want to serve only some customers. We need all customers in order for us to be successful. In order for us to be successful then and serve all customers and serve them the way they want to be served, we need to have all those customers represented inside our organization at all levels. And so my job is to help us, number one, understand that. Number two, take some action against that. And then number three, to your question around how do you measure success? You can measure success in a number of different ways. Representation, what does your organization look like? And does it look the same at all levels? Does it look like, is it more diverse at the lower levels? And then as you get to the top, it's not quite as diverse. And if so, how do you work to solve that, to make sure that you have that representation at all levels of the organization? And then number two is making sure that just because you have different people in the organization doesn't mean they feel like they belong in the organization. So how do you make sure that that whole notion of equity, inclusion, and belonging exists? And then number three, how do you coach, teach, train, and develop folks to make sure that they ascend in the organization to get where they want to be? So ultimately you retain this talent. So that's my job in a nutshell. And those are some of the ways we use to measure it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you see in society the discussion of diversity and inclusion, which I think historically, at least from my perspective, has been kind of soft concepts, but is now turning into business strategy.
Correct.
Yeah. So thinking of that, Stephen, and James's role from, your side as a chief security officer, like what, from your perspective, why is that so important?
Well, I'll start with James first, and I'll touch on something he left off on. So James through his role, but James as an individual is a coach and a teacher. And he's also a thought leader. And one of the things that we see in our organization is, if you think about loss prevention and safety and security as a concept, it's not always integrated into the business. So also to James's point, when you're talking about growth and development of the business, well, how do you become a part of that? So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, primarily we mean, things like gender and race, but of course we also mean function, which applies to us absolutely, support mechanisms. So the way we connected was a natural bridge. It just didn't seem like that from the beginning. I was asking, how do we as a function plug into the business? And what it evolved into was a conversation that grew to be bigger than that, because it's about inclusion holistically, right? So the roles are important because when you think about inclusion, all of those subcomponents equal a better operating picture, a broader aperture, which leads to greater opportunity for success in your space, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we're trying to go deeper than the buzzwords, and I think kind of addressing the role and trying to understand, into the business strategy, into how that impacts LP and safety. I think some of the things you hear is part of the criticism of, okay, great, now everybody's got a chief diversity role. I mean, you hear that a lot, where it's like, okay, well, what does it really mean? Is it just they're gonna be a glorified event planner and plan mixers so everybody can talk to each other? And it's like, okay, that doesn't seem strategic. So when you think about, understanding the key components of this, right, for organizations, and you hear, the concepts of perceived versus actual inclusion, people, perceiving, oh yeah, I'm included in this because they have this role, versus feeling included and part of it. And as we talked about before, this is like the intersection of what shouldn't be business things, right? This is inside me, this is personal, but now I'm also talking about it at work, right? So talk to us, James, a little bit about, what organizations can do with these two concepts, this perceived versus actual, and getting it to meaningful inclusion.
Sure. It's there's a lot of the glorified event planning things. In fact, one of the things when I took over this role, we had what we call employee resource groups, and we still have them today, and I'll speak a little bit to that in just a second. But one of them said, hey, you know, are we going to continue to have this ERG? And I said, no, we're not going to have that ERG anymore. They're like, well, how on earth can you not have this ERG, James? I mean, what are you talking about? I said, well, tell me what you do with this ERG. And they said, well, you know, we have happy hours, and we get together, you know, once a month, and we meet at such and such restaurant, and we talk about, you know, how things are going at work and things like that, you know, and that's, you know, that's what our ERG does. Well, this whole notion of perceived inclusion, because you have an ERG, does not make you an inclusive organization. And in fact, with that particular example, what the ERG was doing, that wasn't an employee resource group. What that was an affinity group where people get together who are like-minded, in many cases look alike, and they talked about experiences that they were having. That's perceived. The real is when you have an employee resource group like Stephen is a part of today. It's called Mosaic. When this ERG is focused on how do we change the business? What are things that we can do to help influence the outcomes of our business as we move it forward? And oh, by the way, along the way, we are not, the group is called Mosaic because everybody is involved. And so we have literally folks who are growing up in the organization who are learning how to lead and engage and influence those who are different than them in this employee resource group that supports a community of people of color. But we have all people in it. That is real. When we talk about real versus perceived, that's one of the ways that you do that. The other way you do that is Verna Myers says, diversity is being invited to the dance, inclusion is being asked to dance. Okay.
Oh, nice.
And this notion of being asked to dance is when you're at the table, you're not seated away from the table and watching the table occur. You are at the table with everybody, and when you have a perspective, your perspective is heard, valued, and understood just like everybody else's is, and most importantly, respected like everybody else's is. That's when you have true inclusion, and that's when people feel like they truly belong, when they can confidently and comfortably be at the table and know that when they make their point or they have their comment, that it's going to be received like everybody else is at the table versus, and you may see this from time to time in many different forms of is perceived inclusion, is someone says, it makes a comment, hey, look, I think that's great, and I think we should go forward with that idea. Awkward silence. And then somebody says, well, Bill, what do you think we should do? The person didn't get acknowledged. What that awkward silence and in that quick turn to ask Bill what he was looking for, what it said is, we don't value you and we don't value your perspective. We don't value your opinion. As a result of that, I don't belong. The downside of that is that very well could have been an idea that was going to change your business that you didn't listen to. So that's the significance of and why you want people to feel like they belong. But there is the perceived versus the real. And the difference is when I know that I know that I know, when I sit at this table, you're viewing me the same way you see everybody else at that table with the same amount of value, respect, and understanding. So I'll stop there.
That's tough. I mean, because you're talking about levels of people's, you know, heart and feelings, and, you know, you don't go to work for a therapy session, right? I mean, it's hard. Like, it's hard. Steven, I'll let you, you know, get in on this one before I move to the next point.
Well, thanks. I was chomping at the bit to say, you know, you started the conversation by saying the difference between a soft concept and a hard concept, and your statement just now talking about trying to separate our internal emotion from our business. You can't. They're inextricably combined, right? And that's the difference, is we're realizing that diversity, whether it be gender or race or thought, equals, it can be your business differentiator. It is a strategy. right? If you think about some of the businesses, the people that run it are different from the people that operate it a lot of times. So if you're not connecting to your customer base, your operator base, there's a talk past and there's an opportunity that will change the level of success you can have, right? If you connect to a broader audience. And I think what's happening is we're trying to do that on an individual basis. What we're asking people is, what do you need to engage? To James's example, the other byproduct of not valuing and acknowledging people the same way is they disengage. And either they'll become a more engaged competitor, or they won't be the same contributor that you thought you were getting when they were so attractive and you hired them in the first place, right? So it lessens their ability to further your business through their interaction.
Yeah, because they don't feel even if I did say something, who cares? They're not going to care anyway. Yeah.
Right.
So one of the things, you think about some of these new concepts, and I could say from my own perspective, right? My own experience coming to the table, going through 2020, the race and ethnicity conversation has come to sharing lived experiences. You hear this often, and you're kind of thinking, okay, well, what is that? And I'm going to put myself out here a second, because it's what we're doing. It's what we're doing, everybody. You're going to hate mail. That's fine. At my calibration. Anyway, you think about sharing lived experiences, and I got to tell you, something changed talking to you, Stephen. You probably remember this conversation where you were sharing with me. I'm full on putting you on the spot. This wasn't on the show prep notes. You were sharing with me some things have happened in your life, right? Getting pulled over in your neighborhood. Well, and you got to give the stat if you want to. You give the stats, and it's like, and being thrown down on the ground, by police officers as a police officer, like federal level. And you shared this with me, and I was thinking, no, not you. That doesn't happen to people. Like, why would that happen to you? Like it, and this isn't 1920. I mean, this is in my lifetime, your lifetime. And I honestly was shocked and floored, because I don't experience that. And I don't even would think, how could that possibly happen in 2021, right? But that's where I come from, right? That's my daily experience. So talk a little bit about this concept, of sharing these lived experiences, because I think that is, and I know, James, this is the drum, right? This is the beat, that this is what connects us. This is what makes me go, wait a minute. This is real, right? This is real. It's not something that happened 1920 and now we're, everything's fine. We're all equal. It's all fine, because that's not my experience. So anyway, go ahead. I know it's super long.
Well, I think when you talk about sharing lived experiences, why that's important is because for people to engage, it has to be personal, right? If you think about the Exxon Valdez oil spill, I know that's a random example, but that was a tragedy in the Gulf Coast. But that didn't stop anybody from going to the beach in California or North Carolina. Did not. Right? We watched it on TV and they're like, oh man, that's terrible. But they still went to the beach, right? So it wasn't personal to them. It was a whole lot different if you lived in Louisiana. Right? The option was taken away from you. It felt differently. Something that you may have enjoyed was now infringed upon. Plus there's a tragedy happening right outside your doorstep, and you can see the byproduct of that every single day. And I think what happens when like you just shared, when you share a story, well, you know me, but you only know what I've given you. You only know what you've bear witness to personally. And there are some things that bind us. So when you hear these stories, especially when it comes to race relations, one of the things about the United States is we don't do a very good job of acknowledging our entire history. Mm-hmm. And that's a delicate dance, right? But acknowledgement is part of how we get to where we go. So if I go back to what you just said, hey, something that changed with you is when I shared a story. I was in law enforcement for over 25 years. And I was pulled out as a police officer or federal agent, 8 separate occasions at gunpoint, right? And I say that, and that's important because there was in my friend group and people that I know, they were awfully dismissive when they would see examples on the TV set with people that they didn't know. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Yeah, but when I get stopped, I do the same thing every time. My interior light is on, my arms are crossed, my car is off. There are no stupid games. I know the rules, right? I used to teach them. And yet, and still, I end up the very same way. So what are we missing, right? And what happens is the conversation becomes convoluted because it becomes ultra simplified. It's complicated, right? In a police conversation, you have to think about fear, on their part and our part. You have to think about experience and exposure, the age and experiences of both individuals and how they're going to react to the circumstance. None of that is what we're talking about. It just becomes black or white. No pun intended. It becomes a race conversation. And that may or may not be a component, and a hefty component. But there's more ingredients to that gumbo, if you will. And I think the part about sharing lived experiences is important because when you can relate to someone, that makes their experience personal to you also, right? If you don't know them to be a fabricator, a storyteller, and you know them to be trustworthy, and you've seen them tell a story that you lived with them, you have no reason to doubt what they're saying. And you're saying, well, right, it brings a new sense of realism to what's happening. And that was something that wasn't happening very frequently because we were trying to separate our personal and our professional. But the reality is some of us carry both of those all day.
Yeah.
I can't separate my personal and professional because I show up differently than most of my counterparts every day.
Well, it's staggering, in the life, experiences that you share with me, because then, I'm sharing it. Like, can you believe this? And then, I have other friends. They're like, well, yeah, that happens. I was like, well, no, I see it. You see it on the news. If you don't have life experience that you can share that this is happening to, and you're like, oh, I'm sure it's a bad neighborhood. There's all these rationalizations, all these excuses that you're like, okay, yeah, okay, right. But then when you're like, wait, in your lifetime, this is happening in our lifetime. It's staggering, and honestly changed me for sure.
We forget there's three sides to every story, right? There's your side, my side, and the truth is probably somewhere in between. And what happens in today's society, we have the option of unfettered and unfiltered constant information, but you're only getting one side of the story.
Yeah.
Right? You're taking it in, but you don't always give it back. How many people have Instagram or Facebook or some social media that they watch, but they don't respond? That's a one-way street.
Yeah.
Right? There's two other sides to that we're not unpacking. And I think the acknowledgement of unpacking the entirety of a story, it's complicated. And it's not new. It's carried on, right? So it's tough. It's a really difficult space, if you will.
James, let me get you in here on these lived experiences.
Yes, I would agree with everything that Stephen said. And the only thing I guess a couple of things I would add is in those lived experiences, as we share them and as we have been sharing them, one of the things that has been very, very helpful is that we have everybody at the table share their experiences, because what is happening in these shared lived experience conversations, to Stephen's point, you get one side of the story. Well, in sharing the lived experiences, there's my lived experience, but then Amber, there's your lived experience. And then there's Stephen and I's lived experience, which very well, while we may look alike or look similar, our experiences may be very different. And so having different people at the table sharing their experiences to include, we include gender, we include all types of different ethnicities to make sure that everybody has an opportunity, because part of what's causing the challenges that we have today, and especially around difference, is if you don't know anybody different and then nobody different has listened to you, you're not necessarily interested in listening to them. And so, right? And so you get these people on these calls, and what we've seen is there was this great young man, one of our general managers, and white male from small town USA. And we all have biases. And so I'm including myself, who does this for a living, but I look at the screen and I'm like, okay, let's see what he's going to have to say. And okay, let's see what they're going to have to say. And, he's from small town USA, kind of got a, dark hair with the mullet going on. I'm like, okay, let's see how this works out. We start sharing lived experiences. An African-American female shared hers. And then a Latino male shared his. And then we came to this gentleman. And what he shared was he felt like he did not belong in his town because he was gay. He came out to he tried to come out, or did come out to his father when he was in his late teens, 17, 18. And his father promptly kicked him out. He came to one of our Pizza Huts, and that has become his respite. And so it's his life mission to make sure that people who are different, who look different, people who may be a different ethnicity, or may be an introvert versus an extrovert, or may be a member of the LGBTQ plus community, he makes it his mission to make sure that every one of those folks, be they customers or employees, he makes sure that he takes care of them. Now, when he popped up on the screen, I didn't think any of that about him. In fact, I thought totally opposite of that. This young man turned out to be one of the best folks on the call. And as I share with you here today, that story was probably August, September, July, August, that last year. And it's still with me because he shared that with me. I know him differently now. And so sharing these lived experiences and having everybody share theirs is critical to the conversation, because to Stephen's point, I'm asking you to listen to me, but I'm not listening to you. And if quite honestly, if you're not willing to listen to me, I'm not interested in hearing from you, because you're going to tell me what you want me to know in here, but I don't get a chance.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy. The other thing I would say is give people grace. When you have these conversations about lived experiences, people are going to say things. They're not always going to come out right. They may say something that may be offensive. Let's give people grace. If you're asking for my lived experience, please give me grace in how I share it, because I'm sharing it based upon how I felt when it happened to me. And I'm going to give you the same grace and respect when you share it, when I chat with you. And if we do that, we reserve some time at the end to say, okay, great. So you said that kind of rubbed me wrong. Okay. But I kind of feel you. Where were you coming from with that? And an individual will tell you that someone told me, I shared that the way I did because that's how my parents shared it with me. But I know that's not the way to share it today. Well, when they said that, now I know that they were raised in a different way, but they made a choice to be different today than they were then. Now, dang it, now I can't hate you, right? Because now it's hard to hate up close when you know somebody, which is why it's important for us to share those life experiences, because once I know you, we've probably got a shared experience together in some way, shape, or form. And that in and of itself starts to connect us in ways that otherwise we probably wouldn't have connected. And that starts, and I apologize if I'm repeating this, but that starts an authentic relationship that leads to trust. And if we can solve for the art, we can do almost anything. But anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah, and you got to come at that with defenses down, right? Which is hard to do on such a ingrained belief or belief system, right? I mean, tough.
Well, you have to listen to understand. You have to listen to learn. And I think one of the challenges is, especially recently, the popular conditioning was to focus on the differences as opposed to starting with the similarities, right? There's more that we are more similar than we are different. And what we like to focus on are the ways that we're different, which is fine. We need to acknowledge those. We need to appreciate those. We need to embrace those. But it's easier to start with where we're the same, where we're similar, right?
Yeah. For
The
sure.
conversation goes a lot further, a lot faster.
Mm, mm.
Okay, so thinking about, the progression of 2020, that's like longest year ever. But, through 2021, we're coming up on some milestones, right? So next May is 1 year of, the shooting of George Floyd. And you think about, a lot of academics out there are saying this is going to be a benchmark, for the race conversation in America, and looking at organizations to say, what did you truly do? If you just are giving this lip service, you appointed a diversity officer and they're making mixers. I don't know. I'm not trying to hate on that. I'm just saying, I don't, we already talked about the roles there and glorified event planners, but, what is it, James, first of all, do you agree with it? And second, how do you ensure, senior leaders in these respective roles, not to sit, and I don't know, is it okay that that's a benchmark? I mean, you think about the time ticking to say, hey, no, you can't turn the Titanic on a dime, especially talking about Yum. I mean, you guys are huge, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do agree with it being kind of a benchmark. And literally in talking with our CEO just yesterday, one of the things he talked about is, hey, look, if we don't measure it, I mean, how are we going to know that we've made any progress, right? And so we absolutely, you absolutely have to put some time binding around things. So I think absolutely, I do totally agree with it. In terms of what are some of the things that you can do, some of the things that we've done is we, like many companies, said, hey, we're gonna commit. In our case, it was $100 million over the next 5 years to this notion of unlocking opportunities initiative. And what that means is we're going to focus on 3 areas. We're going to focus on improving equity and inclusion. We're going to focus on supporting education in underserved communities, and we're going to focus on entrepreneurial opportunities for underrepresented minorities in communities as well. And so
and those goals are specific. Like you guys, that's specific.
Very specific, because again, it's kind of those SMART objectives, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, and all those kinds of things. And so that's where we went, and that's where we're continuing to go. So that's from a broader enterprise perspective in terms of what we're looking to do. But if you want to bring that closer in, then you say, okay, great. So how do I hold my leaders accountable? And for us, our CEO is like, hey, look, I want the metrics, I want the measures that we're going to do, and I want to hold our folks accountable. And one of the ways we're holding our folks accountable is every one of our people, and I may have mentioned this on the last one, so I apologize if it's a repeat, but this notion of having an equity and inclusion commitment. Every one of our folks, Steve and myself, and every other corporate associate here at Yum has to have a equity inclusion commitment. What are you going to tangibly do to improve equity and inclusion in this organization over the next year? And at the mid-year cycle, we look at that and see how they're doing against that. And we're coming up on our performance appraisal cycle where we're going to look at that again and go, okay, great. So did you meet your equity and inclusion commitment? So that's how we're holding not just our leaders, but every single person in our organization accountable for supporting this work. Now, the fact of the matter is, you may have some folks who are like, you know what? I'm not about that, right? I mean, you're not going to make me be inclusive and jump on this diversity bandwagon. Okay, you don't have to jump on the diversity inclusion or equity inclusion bandwagon. What we're saying is we're going to hold you accountable to that because that's part of who we are and that's part of our culture. Now, you can gladly opt out.
Yeah. You're going to promote them to a guest in that case?
We can promote them to a guest. But the reason we want to promote them to a guest is we don't want, if you don't believe in, and in this case, if you don't feel like you belong, because we are going down this path of being fair and equitable to all people, maybe this isn't the place for you. And from myself and the seat that I sit in, and from my CEO's position in the seat that he sits in, we're okay with that. We're not saying this is a place for, if folks don't want to be a part of who we say we want to be as an organization, because there's a book by a gentleman by the name of Roy Spence, great gentleman, look it up. His book says, it's not what you sell, it's what you stand for. It's not what you sell, it's what you stand for. And what we're saying in this moment is that we're going to stand for equity and inclusion for all of our people. And if you don't align with that, we're okay with that too. You just this may not be the place for you.
Yeah, you might need a card of a good therapist, or maybe, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. Just saying, just a little work on the inside.
There you go. Brene Brown's awesome, by the way.
All right, Stephen, I'll let you get in on this, and then we're keeping it saucy. One last question. All right, you go ahead.
So part of our culture is belief in all people, to James's point. So what you heard him say is it's measured, it's incentivized. People are held accountable at every level. We are deliberate and intentional in being fair and equitable to everyone that we employ and everyone that we serve. Period, full stop. So if your question is, how do we make it so? It's how we're built. We make it so, right? If it's on your goals and it's measured, you have choices. You can do or not, as Yoda would say.
There is no try.
There is no try. You can do or not do. But I think that's a byproduct of a great culture, which is exampled by the people who run your organization. How do you measure progress, and how do you ensure that you're making strides in the right direction? Well, you have to acknowledge where you are, because listen, admittedly, everybody's not good at everything, and that's okay. But by acknowledging it, right, it earns you the right to say, listen, I'm acknowledging here's where we are today. The problem only occurs if you're still there, 180, 360, 365, 700, right, days from there. If you're in the same spot, that's the problem. The problem isn't that you're there now. The problem is it becomes if you don't acknowledge where you are and don't change from where you are, knowing that's where you are now, right? So.
Yeah. No, all good points here. Okay, like I said, keeping it saucy, and I'm not gonna let you guys off the hook. So final question here. So many people, this conversation is deeply personal. We've covered that, and can often lead to debate, and you're talking about, even as serious as you guys take it, making it a metric on your performance goals. What advice, and James, we'll start with you, can you give to the audience facing difficult questions around a sensitive topic? Because most people, and this is tough because it's getting out there and the uncomfortable, don't know what to say anymore, especially if you're in the majority. It's hard because now it's like things that you could say, and this is kind of, well, I don't want to say it's kind of likened to #MeToo a little, in the fact that, things changed quickly, right? Of, that you might have thought that was funny a week ago, but now you're don't say that, but thinking about, how do you know what to say and what's okay to say? These are really two separate questions versus, the whole debate thing, right? So anyway, good luck. You all that, James, and then we'll go to Stephen.
First and foremost, I think you create an environment where you set it up where it's not a debate. This is not a debate. I'm going to give you my perspective, and then you give me your perspective. I'm listening to your perspective, you listen to my perspective. So you set up as it's not a debate. So if I know my job is to do nothing but listen, then I know I don't have to try to fight you right now. I don't have to try to debate and all those kinds of things, because I know I'm going to get my turn. So start out by creating that environment. Secondarily, one of the things that start with authenticity, and I keep overusing that word, but if I know that your heart is good and your intentions are good, and you say to me, look, James, I want to have a conversation about all that's going on right now. I don't know how to deal with all of it. And by the way, as I say this, these are real conversations. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but you want me to engage, but I'm not sure how to do that. There's nothing wrong. What we try to do sometimes is we try to be so cute and so perfect and so professional as we engage in these topics. If you don't know, say you don't know. Look, here's the deal. I've been asked to engage, to learn more about my team and to make sure I understand how you're feeling in these moments. And literally, Amber, I sent out a document to help people have conversations with their teams about what happened at the Capitol on the 6th, right? And so what I'm sharing with you is real time. What I asked our people to do is to literally connect with their people and say, I'm not going to pretend to know how you're feeling, what's going on, and how this might be impacting you. And so what I'd like to do is ask you to share with me how you're feeling, what's impacting you, and how you're feeling about that. I mean, it's a difficult topic. I understand that. Let's agree that, we're going to give each other grace, and we'll trust that each other's intentions are great and positive. But please share with me how you were feeling. I want to know. I need to know because I want to get better. I want to do better, and I want to be better. And so if you can share with me your perspective, that would be great. And then I'll be happy to share mine as well. But if you would, please, right? Notice my tone. Notice I'm saying I don't know. I'm not pretending that I know. And when I acknowledge that with somebody, it makes it easier for them to.
It's disarming.
It's disarming. It's disarming. And so this is now not a fight. This is now a conversation. And quite honestly, it ends up, if we're both open and honest, it ends up in the beginning of a relationship. And as I'll say again, once you have that authentic relationship and you trust each other, it's hard to hate because now I know you. So that's what I would do. But literally just be vulnerable in the moment. A lot of times leaders, because we're leaders, we have to try to be leaders all the time. And even when we're not sure how to lead, say, I don't know how to lead in this moment. So I'm just going to ask you to share, and I'll share, and let's give each other respect.
Yeah, and if you're sitting there listening to this audience and you're going, man, blah, 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 I don't know what takeaway there is here, you're missing it. Because these are good examples of how you act or should be acting really in your corporate environment that you could pick up and put down, up the ladder, down the ladder, in your talking to people, in your employee relations. I just had to say that, because it can be portrayed as a fluffy topic, but what you're both providing are real life examples for people to use in difficult conversations, not just on diversity and inclusion. That is a good example that you gave for anything that you may be approaching, walking in there with the empathy, right? And some people have said, if you look at it like you're discussing ideas versus identity, you're not coming at me and my identity. We're talking about ideas, right? And putting that on the table is a little more easily digestible. All right, Stephen, you're up, man.
So leadership is not a position, it's a responsibility. And in having tough conversations, there's some things, again, it goes back to acknowledgement. We are a product of our environment, a construct of our experiences and our exposures. So the more experiences you have and the more exposure you get, the more tools you have in your toolbox, if you will. So where you started and where James started was, it can be a debate. It's never a debate because it's not an or. It's not me or you. It's me and you. The conversation isn't either this or that. It's how do we get them all together, right? So it is a discussion of ideas because we are diverse. If I could ask you a question before I continue. Amber, what do you have for breakfast this morning, if you don't mind sharing?
Breakfast?
Yeah.
I had a meal bar because I'm trying to lose some quarantine weight.
No, easy day. Did you have a meal bar yesterday too?
Yeah.
Same flavor?
No, peanut butter this time.
Did you have a meal bar the day before that?
No. I probably had eggs and bacon.
Okay, so my point is,
because I was starving.
We're diverse by nature.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have the same thing every day because clearly it's edible, it's good enough there's a purpose that you're eating meal bars, right? You shared that with us.
Yeah.
But we require a diverse diet. We require something different to keep it fresh. So when we're discussing ideas, we require other perspectives. That doesn't have to, we can even agree to disagree, but we require other perspectives. And to James's point, when you're vulnerable, when you're authentic, you can earn grace and space and empathy. Because I don't agree, but I can see how you got there. And given what you shared about your background, I understand exactly why it is you do this. Because given that, I would do the exact same thing. That's just not how I'm built, or that's not where I'm from, right? So I think when we listen to understand and we have these conversations, a lot of us go into a conversation believing it's going to be confrontational, but that's a fear-based response, right? You can't fight yourself. It's only confrontational if you allow it to become confrontational, right? So I like all the things that James has said. You know, you have to create an environment that allows people to be seen and heard, be validated, but that starts with being vulnerable yourself, right? It's easy for you to be vulnerable if I'm vulnerable first. If I give you something and say, you know what, I have no idea, that now gives you license to say, you have no idea, but I'm willing to learn. You know, it's funny, if you look at your organization, you know, people will say, oh, we believe in work-life balance. But when you actually see one of your senior leaders leave early from a meeting and say out loud, oh, listen, I got to stop this conference call. I got to go pick up my kid from school, or I got to go watch their clarinet recital. What does that give license to everybody in the room to do? Mm-hmm. Leave to go to their kid's recital when it's time. It's okay because the boss said it was okay. And the boss exampled it was okay. But they may have said it, but until they did it, you didn't believe it. Once they did it, you're like, oh, so I can go to my recital because it's important to us, right? So we also have to demonstrate that it's valuable, that I care, that I want to know. And I have to demonstrate that by asking the question, right? There's a funny thing. When I was in law enforcement, we find ourselves talking to people and at people and not with people. So when you talk about deconfliction, they're not built for that. They're not taught that. How that comes is talking with people, not barking at them and talking to them. It's engaging. So tell me, maybe I'm wrong. I'm assuming I'm wrong. Educate me. So you help me. We'll start with you first. Tell me, what's going on? Okay, now I understand, right? And then there's a how might we or how may we, and there's a discussion that can take place.
For sure. I mean, I think you guys have phenomenal points. It's always phenomenal to have you back in these conversations. You're so easy to talk to, and I think that, you know, we'll keep pushing these ideas because that's really the only way, like you're saying, is we all learn together, you know, and that takes to come at it that way, Stephen, it takes a little work on yourself, because if you're going into it as a know-it-all ego-based thing, you're not going to get there to that empathetic, you know, hey, but if you're, you know what I mean? It's the ego. James, final words, and then we'll wrap this up.
Well, you hit it. As leaders, we're taught that we have to lead at all times in all things. And the fact of the matter is, no, you don't. In fact, some of the most effective leaders are those who ask questions and those who take the ideas of others and elevate those and recognize those. And when you do that, what you say to that individual is, I value you. And that just gets you to all kinds of places and spaces. But I'll end with this. I'd like to just challenge everybody who's watching the session. Take one itty bitty step. Connect with somebody who's different than you and say, hey, just be transparent. I'm trying to get better at diversifying who I know and what I know about folks, and I'm trying to learn about as many people as I can. Is there anything that you'd like to share with me that I might not know about you that you'd like me to know? And leave it to the individual. And they'll say, well, you know, so why do you need to know that? I share with you at the top, I'm just trying to get better and I'm trying to work on me and would love your help in doing so. Would love your help in doing so. Well, Now you're asking me to help you. How am I not going to help you? God dog it. I'm going to turn you down. But ask them for their help. And when you ask for people's help, trust me, they're willing to do that, especially when you're authentic. So I'll leave it there. So Stephen, to you, my friend.
No, I was going to issue the very same challenges. It's incumbent upon each of us to acknowledge our own opportunities. And you don't have to jump off a cliff. Like it's hard to take a giant step, but it may be easy to take a small one. That could be as simple as somebody you already know. You just haven't asked a tough question too. I mean, there's a lot going on in society where there may be some slight differences, and it's easy to engage with someone that's already close to you that you may have a difference of opinion about, right? And so where James used a diversity and inclusion example, I'm going to use one that is a diversity of thought example because it's the same thing. So you may disagree. Just ask them why they feel the way they do and help you to understand their perspective for the very same reasons. Help me to understand. I might not agree, but help me to understand why you feel so strongly that way and what it is that's so attractive to you about that. And let's just discuss it. Pros and cons. Right? And as long as you ensure that it doesn't end in battle and you promise that, listen, at the beginning of this, we already know we may disagree. At the end of this, we may still disagree, but what we promise is it will not change the way we feel about each other, right? And preferably over food or drink, because then you can cement that by then sharing something that you can agree on. Hey, we both love cheese fries, right? So no matter where we stand on this, at the end of this, we'll share those cheese fries because we're both in on it, all right? So yeah, we extend the challenge, like just be better.
That's excellent. So
Amber, can I just one piece of tie?
Yeah.
I've got to tie it back to the
Please.
business. All of this in our conversation, these aren't nice to have conversations. These conversations and all of this dialogue and how to be inclusive, this at the end of the day is about our businesses as well. We don't want and or need some customers for our business, my business, your business, whatever the case may be. You want access to as many potential customers, guests, people who want your business and need your services as you can. I'll just tell you, when people come to me and say, James, we'd love to do business with you, one of the things I ask them is, what does your organization look like? And people have lost our business because they didn't look like our customers who look like all people. So if for no other reason, to engage in this conversation and engage in this work, if for no other reason, do so because your business depends on it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now more than ever, always should have, always will be at this point. So don't get, stuck in really your own ick. You know what I mean? You might think you don't have stuff, but you do. Everybody does, right, guys? I think we are helping get comfortable with the uncomfortable, gentlemen. Again, thank you so much. We appreciate you in this candid conversation. I can't wait to do it again. RLPSA annual conference to go. Thanks for watching. Keep watching. Next session coming right up.